Welcome everyone. World Talent Economy Forum. Today we arrange another interesting interviews. He's a progressive thinker. He involved with politics. He involved with policy as well as he do lot of interesting things. If our audience has any question, you can ask him, and he come up with a different idea how actually 21st century will move with their techno progressive thought, as well as how we can improve our life with better policy, with better analysis, and better global strategy. So, hello, Mr. Benza. How are you?
Yes, hello, Dr. Rana. I want to thank you again for having me on your program. Thank you for your patience with me this morning. We had a small technical difficulty a moment ago, but we've gotten it worked out. And I also want to thank you for your incredible work with the WTEF. I've been following what you've been doing, and also been watching these recent interviews. And I'm honored that you've asked me to join you. And I look forward to this conversation, and I look forward to other work in this world of public policy. And I think it all relates well to this conversation of emerging technology, the difficulties of the times, and progressive and techno-progressive public policy for the 21st century. So thank you again, sir.
Yes, we know you are a very interesting character. You have many interesting thought and issues. But here in Malaysia or Asia Pacific, how you want to introduce yourself? We want to know more about you.
Yes. Well,
about you. Yes.
Yes. Well, a little bit about myself. I mean, a United States independent and techno-progressive presidential candidate. I have a platform which was developed by myself and many fine folks in the futurism studies community, and it is called the Real New Deal for America, and it is a techno-progressive presidential platform also, and it has at the center of it three pillars, which I will describe, and I will relate to it throughout the course of our conversation, how these pillars and policy initiatives of a similar kind that I have begun to work on in a few different areas through my policy consulting business, and that I would like to introduce in Malaysia and in throughout South Asia as well. So the three pillars of this Real New Deal for America are a blockchain voting system and a set of e-governance implementations modeled closely on the blockchain voting and digitalization of governance program that exists in Estonia, a world leader in this area. The second pillar of the Real New Deal for America is rather unique to the United States as an economic policy, and it is called the Middle Class Freedom Dividend, and it is based on a federal land dividend. Federal lands make up about 25% of the area of the continental United States. They are owned by the federal government, and the federal land dividend, this freedom dividend, would be leasing this $173 trillion worth of lands, a very, very great expanse of land, leasing them to different kinds of concerns, carbon neutral concerns that hold to a specific aesthetic, so as not to run afoul of environmentalists. And by leasing these lands, which are held in great number, we can provide every American adult with $1,000 a week, a tidy sum, which would allow them to start small businesses and pursue all manner of good endeavors. Besides, it would revolutionize the United States economy. And I am a basic income and income guarantee advocate, and I will talk at greater length in our later part of our conversation how I would like to bring these essential principles into effect in this transnational context. The third pillar of a number of other policies, but I will speak of these three. The third pillar of the Real New Deal for America is a public health service that uses emerging technology in a more robust way. We know that in the developed world, there is a tendency for countries to have a universal health care. That is not the case in the United States. And that specific problem has led us to the difficulties that you mentioned at the top of this conversation. We are in the midst of a global pandemic, an outbreak that has tremendous implications throughout many areas of civil society. And we are suffering for this. And the United States is suffering worse than other countries in the developed world. The United States is the wealthiest country in the world. And it would have been reasonable to assume that the wealthiest country in the world would have universal health care and would provide these services to its citizens. The United States has a public health service, but it only works for a limited number of people, a specific subsets of the population. The elderly and the very impoverished are the only people who have access to this public health service. Everyone else is forced to participate in a for-profit healthcare scheme, and the failings of this scheme have come into sharp focus in recent months. But in fact, prior to 2020, in 2019, 70,000 Americans, a number larger than the population of many countries, died because of this failing to provide universal health care. And that continued in years prior and will continue in the years after we have ended this pandemic if we do not adjust our public health service. But even what we have discussed, this world standard for care in universal health care in the developed world, this is not good enough. We need to use emerging technology. We need to follow the model that is being used by countries like Estonia to an increasing degree, because they've done the good work of digitalizing other sectors. Now they're able to be digitalizing their public health service. We need to follow the model of countries like Japan. We need to have all of this information that is readily available. It needs to be systematized, and we also need to use all manner of emerging biomedicine in a more powerful way. We could easily be doing a good deal more with less, and this is another reason why the United States does not have a public health service. People point to this high cost, and this high cost no longer being distributed across various entities and sectors of the marketplace, but rather being shouldered by the United States government. And so, even though I do not consider these concerns to be the most valid of concerns, we must address this problem in general. As you are probably aware, public health services, for example, the United States has many trillions of dollars that are spent on public health initiatives, and almost all of that money is spent effectively for end-of-life care. A person goes about their business for many, many years, and they may have an underlying condition that they are not aware of. It comes to the attention of their physician, and at that time, it is difficult to treat. And so the net result is that we spend many, many trillions of dollars to enhance or sustain quality of life for these final few months. And that is an oblong effect. We, of course, do not want to begrudge these people treatment. That would be monstrous. But we do need to find ways to correct this problem. And that is why when we are saying that we want to have a public health service that uses technology in a better way, we are talking about using things like senolytics, like this digitalization effects that I've described. All of these things that would allow us to have prevention and maintenance throughout one's life, because a person has a close relationship, so to speak, with their public health service, with their doctor, with this vast amount of information that can be collected. And all of this would allow us to do for pennies on the dollar what we do today in time in public health. And this approach must be taken to improve this situation. So these are these three most important pillars of the Real New Deal for America, my presidential platform. And I will, I hope, to discuss at greater length in the course of this conversation how these essential disciplines, these essential undertakings, will relate to projects that I have begun to spearhead. My organizations, for example, recently worked on something somewhat related to this public health service proposal. We have a presentation to the Argentinian Congress for a public health service that goes in some way beyond what I've just described by being an anti-aging public health service, by treating aging as a disease. And I began working with some business leaders and community leaders in Argentina a few months ago, and I wrote this proposal for them. And this proposal states that in Argentina, the city of Buenos Aires, which has its own set of public health initiatives, will declare aging as a disease. And because COVID-19 co-occurs more commonly in elderly people, it affects more elderly people far more, that it is very timely for us to try to see that these anti-aging and life-extending initiatives are focused on. And so a dear friend of mine, Sergio Torrero, is going to be presenting via video to the Congress of Argentina on behalf of these many organizations who are now involved, and on behalf to prevail upon them to see that aging is treated as a disease. And I have since begun work with this and a few related initiatives, somewhat related public policy initiatives that also are designed to have this effect of creating emerging transnational compacts and to allow for better outcomes in policy. We're going to see a tremendous amount of change over the course of the 21st century. And some of that change we are beginning to feel. I do feel that some of the troubles in the world today are a result of these growing pains, this unreadiness and unpreparedness to deal with such tremendous change so quickly. And this idea of having a policy initiatives of a transnational kind, the others that I will discuss at greater length. This is hopefully to set the stage for a world that can survive. Because I am afraid, Dr. Rana. I look at the world right now, and I feel fear. I feel that the human race, if we do not begin to correct the error of our ways, there may not be a human race by the turn of the century. And we have to be doing more to see that we are prepared for the changes that we face.
Yes, very interesting how you analyze your pillars and the policy and other things. My question is that, let's say, from your political point of views, you have a better chance to solve global issues. Okay, so let's say the developing nations like us, like developing nations, there are many developing nations, but at present situation, we find there are a lot of challenges, especially economic challenge. And in that particular situations, we also find that there are some risks, what you are talking about, this AI and humans, and even many people right now, they lose their job. Even Singapore government, today I saw that they declare their first priority, Singapore government, they want to fix this unemployment problem. They want to create more job for the people. So in these challenging situations, how actually US governments they should play in the global arena, or how we can build up better global relationship. What's your thought on that particular point?
Yes, yes. Well, I mentioned that a federal land dividend is a part of my presidential platform. But in the past, I've been a supporter and worked on initiatives relating to other kinds of programs, negative income tax, also a robot tax. I spoke to my friend Jason in a podcast a few weeks ago, Jason Mallory, who's also basic income, a legislator and advocate, and he is a proponent of a robot tax, and I think for other countries, something like a robot tax might be the better choice. There's no other country that has this great quantity of federal lands that could be monetized in the way that I described a few minutes ago, and so I do think that countries must begin to have basic income guarantees. And this is a substantial proposal. Spain in recent weeks has advanced a durable basic income, a durable minimum income guarantee, and it is only actually going to be for just a little bit more than 10% of the population who will require this. It's an income guarantee. So somewhere around 3 million people will require it. It's still at a cost of some trillions of dollars per year to Spain. And because of the coronavirus outbreak, the devastation to this economy, their relationship to the European Union, there was some controversy around this basic income initiative that they have undertaken, because some of the other countries in the European Union were balking at the bailout cost of, in general, for these countries that were most devastated, Italy and Spain in particular. And this is something that this kind of balking is something that we will continue to see from politicians and others, but they will quickly realize that when these basic income programs are initiated, the economy will grow dramatically. Maybe not on day one, but it will grow dramatically and change the quality of work that people are able to do. It's even in a place like Singapore, which has a very, very good relationship to its workers and growing businesses. But even in a place like this, there's a lot of people who probably look at their job and feel that they are doing make work, feel that if they had a basic income, they would reassess what they're doing and start their own concerns. And some of them might not. In the basic income pilot programs that exist, the only people who are dropping out of the economy at the time that they're given a livable wage in the form of a basic income are people who are literally in the process of having a child, people who are women who are pregnant, people who are starting families. Those people are the ones who will take a few months and collect this benefit. But everyone else, it seems to be quite uniform in these programs. Everyone else immediately goes out about their business of starting a new business and reintegrating themselves in a more healthful way into that economic system. And that is something that we must recognize, and we must recognize the way in which our current economic systems, even in the best of circumstances, are suboptimal. We are not providing people with a real living. We are not providing people with anything but a lot of make work. In the United States, 55% of workers work in some facet of the service industry. Those people are overwhelmingly paid an artificially low wage. the United States minimum wage is not a livable wage. Those people are also suffering under another similar a similar concern. They have artificially high housing costs. So you can almost imagine these people as a lot of hamsters running in a wheel, accomplishing very little and doing a great deal of effort in the process. This is not an acceptable set of circumstances in the civilized world. We must aspire to something better, and a basic income set of programs will allow for exactly that. I mentioned that there's a policy consulting set of initiatives that relates to some degree to the platform ideas that we've discussed. I will discuss now how this could relate to Malaysia or South Asian countries, and how it relates to a few countries that we've already discussed. So imagine for a moment that now the government of Spain has created a permanent minimum income guarantee of a livable kind. And countries, perhaps it's the year 2022, other countries are quickly, some of them are quickly following suit. Perhaps South Korea, which has stated a strong interest, government officials have stated that they are seriously considering this option. So in 2022, some of these other countries are entering this field as well. So this policy proposal, it's a series of if-then statements that is addressed to many governments, and it says that if you adopt this preliminary policy proposal, you have agreed to enter into a kind of special relationship with the countries that already have a basic income, like Spain, and that will allow for a number of particular special economic relationships, and also special immigration relationships between these countries. And the idea of focusing on these immigration relationships is to remove a perverse incentive. Right now, pensioners in the developed world, a small percentage of them will leave the country where they are receiving funds, in many cases public funds, and they will exploit some economy of scale elsewhere. So, for example, a person collecting Social Security in the United States might decide to buy a home in Jamaica, where homes are much cheaper. And this is a fine thing for the person concerned. There should be no value judgment to this. It's a fine thing for the economy of Jamaica. But if a large number of people begin to do this, it represents an exploitation of the economic system and an undermining of a basic income initiative. So the idea of removing this perverse incentive is to essentially create something a little bit similar to an open borders compact between these countries that have a livable basic income. And this kind of compact would say, if you are living in Italy, if you are living in Spain, and you are collecting a basic income, well, we'll make it a little easier for you to move to South Korea, or to move to these other countries that have a basic income. But we won't make it any easier for you to go elsewhere. You might not be able to collect that basic income if you try to go to a country that doesn't have, isn't a part of this basic income compact. And this removes a perverse incentive, but it also creates a tremendous incentive for other countries to join a basic income compact, and also to standardize the values and practices of the basic income scheme. And so this is one that I think could have great promise for countries like Singapore and Malaysia and other countries that have solved many of these other grand challenges. Both Singapore and Malaysia have a very elegant economy, have a very fine set of public health outcomes, doing good work. But as I said, in the context of a public health service in other countries, even though these countries have a good public health service by 20th century standards, we can always be attempting to raise the bar and improve these standards. And I think that this Basic Income Compact does that.
Yes, I just want to share with you about the Malaysian context. You know that they are actually managing this pandemic situation very well, and especially not too much of people affected in COVID-19 in Malaysia. Few people died. 118 people died, and especially healthcare system and the governments, they are taking a lot of good initiatives. Especially Malaysian people, they also help a lot to their government, like for their mask, they use their mask properly, they maintain it, everything actually controls. I just want to promoting these things because it's my observation. If any countries and the countries people, they can manage everything properly, and the government also take a lot of good initiatives, as well as people also help to their governments. Malaysia is not too much of big. Let's say 30 million people live in Malaysia, but what we are observing in these pandemic situations, now they are open their economy step by step, especially based on the SOP. I'm very hopeful about Malaysia, and Malaysian people also very peaceful. By this time, there are a question from the audience. She is Humaira Taljila. She appreciates your analysis. She said, "Hello, sir. Thank you for your time here. Sir, do you think that immigration process will largely hamper because of pandemic situation in USA? What do you think? Because in USA, many immigrant people, even from Asia, they go to USA, and now from the government they are giving a lot of strategy, even many immigrant feel threat what's going on or what will be the changes, we don't know. So maybe this is the perception she want to share with you. What's your experience, or how?
Could you do me a favor, Dr. Rana? I think you cut out for a moment. Could you restate her question?
Yes, her question is that, do you think that immigration process will largely hamper because of pandemic situation in USA?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. This is an unusual set of circumstances throughout the course of 2020 that has already led to, for example, just in recent days and hours, the European Union, which was effectively for some time ground zero of this coronavirus pandemic, but because they have had a little bit better management of this problem in recent weeks, and the United States management of the problem has gotten a good deal worse. The European Union is intending to close borders effectively with the United States. This has already been the case with our two neighbors, Mexico and Canada. Both have closed borders to the United States well prior to the time of the European Union doing so, because of this similar set of concerns. So we can expect more and more of this. This has already been something that the United States President Donald Trump had undertaken before the coronavirus outbreak. He is not a tremendous supporter of migration from other countries to the United States, and so because of these two things, a ruling party that is against immigration, effectively, and a set of circumstances of the kinds that we've described. Yes, I would unfortunately say that your listener is correct, that it will become increasingly difficult in the coming months and years to move to the United States. Some of those, as we mentioned, some of those responses are more, at this time, as much to do with the safety of those other countries as the United States.
One of the interesting things I just want to share with you, why I share the Malaysian context, because in Malaysia I find there are many people, and they are very peaceful. They are highly educated, and even I know many women, they wear hijab, as well as they are working as a faculty researcher in university. Everywhere you find that Malaysian women and Muslim women, they are playing a very good jobs in their things. Even I find most of them are very peaceful. Even in this pandemic situation, you find that Malaysia playing very good because of their local people. Local people community actually helping their government policy and everything. Government also take a lot of good initiative. But in recent year, we find lot of tension that in between USA and the Muslim community, many of the media and many more things, they try to promote that Muslims are not fundamentalists, they are not educated enough, they create a lot of problems. But how we can develop better global relationships? Because I can give you the guarantee, because as a neutral person I can say it, Muslim community also have many good things. Muslim community has economic wise many good policies. They are also highly educated. Most of them, I want to say 99%, even more than that, they are very, very aware about the global economy, global policy, and peacefully they want to live. But in recent year, what we see, what your observations, how we can improve this relationship, global relationship, and how we can Muslim community want global branding and better branding. What do you think?
Yes. Well, I think that this set of concerns is not dissimilar from a set of
Mhm.
concerns that the United States has in a slightly
Mhm.
different dimension on the world stage. We know that in the United States there is a certain kind of pride of a patriotic feeling, but internationally there's something quite the opposite in some cases. There is a kind of anti-American sentiment, and this is something that has grown out of a response to the United States' imperial or militaristic relationships with other nations, and also maybe other concerns. And this is something that we have not done enough to address the wrongs that we have done as a country. And it is something that I would say I do regard Donald Trump to be not a good figure on the world stage. He has initiated a trade war with China, which has led us into a situation where we are now effectively in a hybrid trade war and cyber war, and also cascading bio war undertakings of different kinds. Although, of course, the coronavirus did originate naturally, but there are very many intrigues at every step of the way and between any country when something like this happens. And China and the United States are at the top of the list of those kinds of intrigues. And this is a sad situation. But to Donald Trump's credit, although he has largely behaved as a buffoon on the world stage, he is not a war hawk. He is not someone who this was a standard practice for United States presidents until quite recently for them to be quite militaristic, and yet Donald Trump represents some departure from this. He has not escalated these kind of conflicts to as high a degree as you might have imagined. Although the other mistakes that he has made perhaps outweigh those concerns. It's a poor prize to say that he has avoided wars when so many other mistakes of his have led us to the kinds of very serious problems that we now face. But I think that we could say much the same thing of the Muslim world. Many of these institutions, they can more easily be embraced on the world stage. They can become and increasingly do become a more secularized initiative. Of course, Indonesia, a country in the region that we haven't discussed yet, is the largest Muslim country in the world. But the people there, they have a pretty happy relationship with secular institutions. Historically, they have, and that is something that I feel must be emphasized first and foremost if you want to see this kind of a problem really truly addressed. You must not ever find yourself in a situation where you're descending into theocracy. Theocracy is not terribly nice place to live. So something more like representative government does tend to hold better to human rights and economic and political stability. So this is something that, as far as the prejudices of others in other countries, that is largely their problem. The United States is a place where people seem to have an awful lot of prejudice against folks in the Muslim world. That is unacceptable. But that is not the fault of persons living in South Asia. That is the fault of American people who need to be better educated on the subject.
Okay, very interesting. One specific things I want to know, like any peoples, even in the new reform candidate like you, even new politicians, when they come to the politics, they come up with a very good strategy and very good hope. So but after when they come to the politics and they like gain the political powers with the much people popularity and trust, then they change, then they cannot play properly, and they cannot do what they promise to the peoples. How much people should trust you and give their trust to you, and how you can we can trust that when you come up as a progressive leaders, you will fulfill all of your like three pillars and all of the good things for the peoples. Like every time there are a lot of misunderstanding in between. People come up with a good commitment, then they do not maintain their commitments. How we can trust you?
Policy analysts in the United States are often quick to observe that there's a regression to the mean of presidential administrations. So, for example, the previous President Barack Obama, he ran in 2008 on a reform ticket, but he regressed to the center, so to speak, in his policy matters, and that I don't hold that to be largely his own failing. I hold it to be, to a high degree, his own failing, but also an incredible amount of pressure from the aforementioned Republican ruling party, who forced him to the right, so to speak. But his predecessor ran on a different kind of platform in the year 2000 and 2004, a more jingoistic and economic conservative platform. But he also regressed to the mean. He moved into the center. So while these people had different messaging, in practice, their administrations were not so different as their messaging tended to be, and that is an upsetting thing to me, because I would have liked to have seen a President Obama who was more like his campaign promises and less like his Republican predecessors, and that is something that I noticed in more recent years, and many people have observed this as well. It is why in 2016, I was a supporter of Senator Sanders in the United States primary over Hillary Clinton, because I felt that Senator Sanders would have been a person who did not regress in this way in practice as a president. He would have fought to implement a public health service, or fought to see these humane economic policy reforms and these undertakings that were so desperately needed. And we could say that of the 2020 cycle. I was far more interested in the campaigns of Elizabeth Warren, who is an economic reforming policy virtuoso, or Senator Sanders again, who was for some time the leader of the I don't know how much your viewers have been following this election. But the point is, my feeling is that economic reformers must stick to their guns. You must stick to these good first principles, so to speak, to go to Elon Musk, and that is the whole ball game. There is no kind of justice in this world except for economic justice. These other things are important ideas, but the economic justice is what does ultimately affect people's quality of life and the stability of a nation. And so, in the first 100 days of my administration, if this pandemic were still going on, I would declare an emergency executive order to reduce the Medicare age to zero until the time that the pandemic had subsided. That is, I would provide a public health service provisionally to all Americans in their time of need. And I'm astonished that Donald Trump hasn't done this. I feel any good president would have done this in this time in a country that does not have a public health service like we have. But the United States has suffered for many, many decades under the thumb of moneyed special interests who determine public policy far more than the legislative and voting processes. And these special interests in the United States, particularly relating to public health, the special interests of big pharma and big insurance, they have made it extremely difficult for us to prevent those 70,000 Americans a year from dying because of the imperfections of our public health initiatives. And I count these kind of people to be murderers, not just good businessmen. These are bad people, and we must. And this is something that would not change were I to become president. We would continue this fight to see that our middle class is restored.
One important thing, you said that you are a big fan of Hillary Clinton's and these things. Even I finished my PhD when I have my research paper on glass ceiling factors. USA is the best countries with their economic powers and everything around the world. They are biggest democratic countries, as well as they believe in freedom of speech, as well as we find that Hillary Clinton has very good political careers, backgrounds, highly educated women. But why? This is actually a question. Why USA miss this kind of dynamic leadership? What's the reason? Is it the reason only she women, or is there any strategic mistake or any challenges inside USA has? Like you are now analyzing about Donald Trump and other things. On the other hand, from the developing nations, we find, even as a researcher, I find that Hillary Clinton was a very dynamic leader. But why USA choose different strategy? What's the issues behind
that? There's any number of problems that could be described there, and what you alluded to, misogyny, is one of those concerns. Also, one of those concerns, which relates very directly to problems of the day, is an anti-intellectual knee-jerk reaction, which played into this disdain for the Clinton campaign in 2016 on the part of many Americans, many people in Middle America, as it's called, many Republicans. They had a strong aversion to her personality for reasons that are not entirely clear, and some of that is not only down to cultural issues. We know. There was in the United States something called Russiagate, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. Russiagate was a little bit of a canard, a little bit of a red herring, because there was all manner of influence operations domestically, like Cambridge Analytica and many, many others, that were manipulating public opinion, and in this case, manipulating public opinion against a candidate like Clinton, who would have been a relative reform candidate to Trump. So these business interests were very interested in seeing that these reforms did not occur, because that could lead to them paying more taxes. So they were happily spending many tens of millions of dollars on these kinds of manipulations, and manipulations of other even more disturbing kinds have been commonplace in the United States for many decades. The United States is a place that is rife with voter suppression and electoral dirty tricks. And this is basically party dogma of the Republican Party, that voters must be suppressed, particularly working poor voters and people of color. Just a few days ago, there was a primary in the state of Kentucky, and just a few days before that primary, polling places in great number were closed to such a degree that an entire city, an entire region of a city of Louisville, Kentucky, which was primarily people of color, had one polling place for some 600,000 people, and that is, of course, obscene. There should be many, many polling places, and this practice of voter suppression has led the United States to be judged by outside watchdog agencies, by Princeton University, as a place that is no longer a functioning democracy. That's to say, policy professionals, when they analyze the United States, they say, "I'm sorry, my friends, you do not live in a democracy anymore." And that is because of these kinds of dysfunctions and concerns, and that is something that we must address.
So you are master of policy making, and you are working with the policy and other things. And now we are moving with techno policy. So
Yes.
yes. So what's your perception? What will happen next 2-3 years in the techno policy? And what are the changes we can see in the techno policy recent years? Even if you have any analysis based on the developing nations and the developed nations, we want to know more.
Yes. Well, some of what is going to occur in the coming years relating to policy is a continuation of existing trends, but in a little bit different form. So there has been a sense over the last 10 years, and it's a very real sense, that data is king, and this is going to continue to occur, and it has great implications for the functioning of various nations. And I actually would like to take this time to speak a little bit of the third of my policy proposals that would relate to countries in South Asia more directly. So I have a friend. He's a friend of the Real New Deal and a friend of my organizations. His name is Florian Marcus. He is an undersecretary of iVoting in Estonia, and he has said that, and this is not a unique development. This has been the position of Estonia for a few years, that they are willing to work with other countries to develop the same style of blockchain voting and the same style of digitalization of government services that exist to a very, very high degree in that country in other countries. And this is, in fact, the third of the policy initiatives for my policy consulting business that I wanted to discuss. So I have a friend who worked on a similar project to the one I mentioned in Buenos Aires in a country called the Grenadines. And we have drafted this proposal that says that we will broker this relationship and facilitate this relationship, even up to crowdsourcing, beginning to crowdsource funds so that this country, the Grenadines, can begin to have a blockchain voting system in the style of Estonia. So the idea would be to create a block of digital governments. And this also is the kind of thing that could be very helpful in the course of the 21st century. If we develop direct digital democracy and develop transnational institutions that cooperate with that direct digital democracy, we may prevent problems of the kind that we've described earlier in this call between the United States and China, or conflicts of other kinds, by using technology and using transnational institutions in a responsible way.
There are some good audience response. Shumon Dorji, he said, nice conversations. Mr. Azizur Rahman, he said, excellent conversations. Bill, please tell us what is the future strategy we should apply on South Asia economy after like this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Well, this South Asia comprises of a great many countries,
Mhm.
of a great many different political institutions and economic systems and qualities of life. So the approach for a place like Singapore or Malaysia that has not been too terribly affected by the coronavirus outbreak and whose economy will quickly bounce back to the sort of regional tiger status, the regional powerhouse that it so deservedly has that reputation for being. This might be a different set of concerns
Mhm.
for from countries that have a lower per capita GDP and so forth.
Mhm.
I'm reminded of in South America, in better times, in Brazil a few years ago. Brazil initiated a policy proposal called the Bolsa program, which was a guaranteed income, not wholly dissimilar from the one I described in Spain, except much less money. Brazil is a poor country relative to Spain, but they nevertheless recognized that they had many, many people in this country who were not receiving enough monies from their work. And if they gave them this small monthly stipend in the form of this Bolsa program, those people would be in a little bit better position to be stable contributors to the economic health of the country of Brazil. And
Mhm.
this program has been a good success. And any country can develop a proportional and fiscally responsible set of economic policies of this kind. And I
Mhm.
should also say, of the basic income compact that I mentioned, this policy initiative, we have been very careful in writing these policy initiatives and proposals to try to create a system that will include basic income countries, even if they are not as wealthy as the other countries. They should still be able to participate in that special relationship,
Mhm.
as long as they are providing a proportional basic income to their citizens. They should have that somewhat favored status and immigration status. This the world of immigration is not a perfect one, and the
Mhm.
world of in economic insecurity and inequity is far from perfect overall. But we should hope that these kind of proposals, as they advance in the 21st century, will do more and more to see
Mhm.
that this kind of justice
Mhm.
prevails.
Yes, even as you are a policy research and you do work on that particular points, we from Asia Pacifics and from South Asia, we want to offer you like this research on economy. Maybe you can understand better developing nations, and you can understand how you can implement this economical aspects, because we love to engage with people. We love to understand. Like, I can share my personal opinion. Let's say I'm actually from Bangladesh. So when I go to the Europe and European cultures, and I meet with the European peoples, and I go to the Oxford and the Cambridge, and that time actually I learn a lot, and I understand there are some gap. So we want to minimize this gap. So we want to offer you policy research in terms of economic aspects, then maybe better economical research and economical point of views and policy maybe we can find out for our government, for our corporations, and for our NGOs and ecosystems. I have
Mm-hmm.
a specific another specific things. Recent years, because we know that those who in public figure, they have lot of analysis, criticize many things. We don't mind because we understand you properly, how you analyze your critical things. But recent days, we find that there is a big issues with these Benjan burgers and these things. So is there any, do you want to for our audience, or for your audience, you want to give any kind of explanation? Already I know that in internet you give your explanation, but from World Talent Economic Forums, because this is completely different thought, different perceptions. But what you did we never see it. What's the
Yeah.
issue behind that? Yes.
Yes, yes. So I'll address what you said first, and that I am also excited to learn more about the WTF and to strengthen this relationship with these South Asian countries. This is nothing could please or excite me more, and
Mhm.
this idea of doing this policy work in countries. There's a country like Malaysia, a country like Singapore. It
Mhm.
exists in a class of its own in the
Mhm.
things that it is accomplished, and
Mhm.
it exists in a class of its own as being a hyper technological city state. No
Mhm.
such thing exists elsewhere, and this is something that is of particular interest to people like myself, who I don't simply come from a public policy background. I come from futurism studies background. I'm
Mhm.
interested in the hyper technological city state, and I'm
Mhm. Yes.
interested in what its fate might portend for people elsewhere.
Mhm.
And speaking of futurism studies, you mentioned a specific publicity stunt that
Mhm.
came out of my bio lab, Quixotic Life Sciences.
Mhm.
Rather than discuss that at great length, I will refer people to my video response of some days ago. But I will say that it is true that Quixotic Life Sciences did develop a cultured meat product that
Mhm.
came from my own skin, and
Mhm.
that this was done in an interest of something that philosopher Richard Dawkins has written about quite a lot.
Mhm.
He feels, and I feel, that lab grown meat and clean meat, and also various other options, veganism and meat replacements, which are becoming incredibly commonplace. These things must be embraced because we live in a world right now where factory farming is a number two contributor to climate change, the most serious of existential risks. One that
Mhm.
we might be quick to forget how much people are suffering from this because of other concerns of 2020. But it remains a serious concern already in places like Bangladesh and other countries. We are beginning to see more and more. This
Mhm.
is common in island nations in South Asia. More and more economic refugees, climate refugees, because
Mhm.
of this problem. And this is not a problem
Mhm.
that Bangladesh caused. This is a
Mhm.
problem that the United States and Western countries caused and continue to contribute to. And yet, like with the coronavirus outbreak, the poorer people and working people are the ones who suffer for the mistakes of the elites and the institutions, the larger institutions. And so this publicity stunt, which is admittedly a colorful one, was one that was designed to draw focus to the need for more serious action on behalf of the climate, to regulate this factory farming business, to regulate and remove the incentives for factory farming of cattle, which really is the major contributor to that incredible consumption of water, incredible deforestation, incredible amount of gas that's released. These are damaging things that are contributing substantively to climate change. After fossil fuels, this is the number two cause of climate change, as I said, and we do not have the political will. We do not really have the public interest to see the changes made to this system. People continue in the Western world, particularly in the United States, to consume meat in great quantity. When in the midst of this coronavirus outbreak, one of the few things that
Mhm.
President Trump did
Mhm.
in response to the coronavirus outbreak was to protect
Mhm.
this business. We shouldn't be protecting this business.
Mhm.
We should be creating, instead of subsidies for this destructive factory farming business, we should be creating subsidies for cleaner businesses like clean meats and meat substitutes. We should be moving all of those subsidies from that concern to these emerging technology concerns. And it was my hope that by consuming this unusual meat product, that I could insert myself into a discussion of this lab-grown meat and this future of this industry. And I was not expecting that it would be so controversial among people in futurism studies. In fact, people from my community have been more upset by this than people from other communities. And I don't quite understand how the futurists are more conservative than other people that I know, but that does seem to be the case.
I actually took 1 hour from you, but there are more audience response. Will you interested to give their answers, or what's your advice?
Yes, we can continue if you like.
Okay. Thank you. Alia Ahmed, she said, "Dear sir, is there any changes in health insurance policy after overcoming this pandemic situations? Like she want to know more about healthcare insurance policy. Even like developing nations, many countries even they do not have proper health insurance like USA. Maybe this aspect she want to know from you." Mr. Azizur Rahman, he said, "Thanks, Mr. Benzaun." Author, I think I don't know. He's your follower maybe. Stop representing Richard Dawkins. Anyway, Mohammad Shohel Rana, he's supporting us a lot. He said it's a great discussion. Thanks, Mr. Benzan. I think you are very positive. You have very positive mindset. Can you tell us how we can get in touch, take opportunity or learn from the foreign country like USA after this COVID-19? Like he want to learn more about US technology and other things. So I get two specific point. One is healthcare insurance policy, and another one's if people want to learn more and want to more engage with USA tech policy or tech strategy, what you are talking, how they can get more chance.
Yes. Well, yes. I would be curious to know the first question, where this individual hails from. Where is she? Where is she?
She is, I think, from South Asia.
Actually, okay.
Yes. South Asian context, like yes.
Well, that narrows it down only a little. But I would say, well, my feeling is that we should not have these private health insurance schemes. That any country can implement a public health service that will tend to be a good deal better at addressing the needs of the population. And in the United States, this privatization of this life-saving discipline has, as I said, led to an increase in deaths. 70,000 people died in 2019. Those people would still be hugging their grandchildren and going about their business had we not privatized the public health service as we did so many decades ago. And this is very, very unfortunate. So not every country will follow the same trajectory, and not every country has the set of corruption and lack of concern for its middle class or these other management issues. Singapore, whose praises we were just singing moments ago, does tend to have a more privatized class of institutions. But Singapore is a small place and managed more like a municipality because it is, and that creates fewer difficulties of this kind. As to the broadening effects of the later question, what are the implications of moving forward for all of us in COVID-19? I think that we do have to begin to think more cooperatively as individuals. Individuals being highly uncooperative in the United States. That's why we have 130,000 known deaths of coronavirus compared to a few hundred in your country, because individuals are not wearing masks. They're not acting in a safe way. Also, they're prevailing upon governments and institutions to reverse the policies of lockdown and so forth, and that has led us to resurgences of the coronavirus. That is a horror. That is a horror. I remember when this outbreak first began in South Korea. People were saying, "My God, South Korea, it's underwater, so to speak. It's terrible there." But the government of South Korea behaved appropriately. The people of South Korea behaved appropriately. They wore their masks. They practiced safe social distancing, and whenever possible, they practiced lockdown conditions. And now, how many people have died in South Korea? Only a few hundred. And this is because they did not succumb to short-sighted policies and short-sighted ideas on part of the general public. It's been the case in East Asian countries for a long, long time. Any individual who was sick in any given context might be wearing a mask. So there was already this sense of this as an ordinary behavior, and there's other sorts of things that bespeak a cooperative nature in people, and the United States is a place rather unlike that, unfortunately. So if the question is what can you learn from the United States as far as individuals in the United States, I would say be a little bit wary of trying to follow what Americans are doing, because right now they're not the most reliable of people.
Okay, very important. So the last question from my side: what's the three advice you want to give in the present economic conditions, like now step by step, even in Asia Pacific country like Malaysia, they are open up their economy. Even many countries try to open up their economy, and many people even lose their jobs. And like different manufacturing industry, they are not performing very well. In that situation, what three things or three strategy we should take right now? What's your advice?
Yes. Well, my advice is I mentioned three policy initiatives, three policy consulting set of kinds of proposals that, and I would say that we can put an ordering of importance on those three that might shed some light on this overall. So a basic income, it's not cheap. A public health service, in the absence of one, it's not cheap. So these are important considerations. But the third of the three that I mentioned, e-governance and blockchain voting, this is something that can be done that will be more quickly a cost-saving measure. Countries can begin to develop these kinds of digitalization services and see improvements in many sectors as a result, and also see cost reductions in those institutions as a result. So I would say of these three things that I have discussed, I would say that for South Asia and for other parts of the world, emphasizing participating in something like an Estonian bloc that I mentioned, participating in these kinds of initiatives, even in without this kind of compact between digital democracies, is a very good approach. And we should also consider that right now we are in the midst of a series of black swan events, unprecedented events, a series of strange events occurring, the kind of strangeness that's not been seen since the Second World War, this scale of black swan events. And after the Second World War, in a few short years, the world went from having about 60 nation states or something about around that number to around 200 that we have today. And this was because of this the cascading effects of this series of black swan events. And we're likely to see this in the coming years as well. And how is this seem to being manifested? It seems to be manifested today by populist movements of human beings becoming more reform-minded, so a kind of left creep, if you will, and also institutionally a kind of top creep, more centralization, more solidifying of power on the parts of governments. This digital democracy idea represents capitalizing on both of those trends, which are very powerful trends at this time. And so I would encourage people to consider that this is a good time for this. There's many other kinds of policies that might emerge. More and more countries might be beginning to have other kinds of surveillance, CCTV in more and more cities, other kinds of things of this kind that might represent more that top creep on the political compass. There's many policy trends that I imagine we will be better tracking in the years to come. But the thing that I believe we must do is focus on the development of stable and humane economic policies that allow us to have greater trust between nations and within nations, and see that we are all living well and surviving well into the 22nd century.
Brilliant. Basically, World Talent Economy Forum, we are also working with this UN 17 Sustainable Goals, and we love to contribute, as well as policy researchers and this kind of dynamic voice we always want, because if you can contribute in our research, and we can do a strong bridging in between USA and Asia Pacific, then we can share the different knowledge, different things, different perspective. Even in my personal life, I always say, okay, let's say when I do my MBA, I learned a lot from US writer book, but I missed many important things in theirs, because in the South Asian economy, we have microcredit, microfinance. We have different brilliant examples. Even in Asia Pacific, in Malaysia, we have Petronas, we have Islamic finance, and many interesting things, and we want to integrate it. Without integration of this kind of brilliant things, how you think that progressive thoughts as well as real life example, then I think your progressive thoughts and our progressive thinking, it will be more mature. We can contribute more for the better human beings and more for the better civilization. This is our objective, and this is very brilliant discussions. Even I don't know, there are more questions. I don't know if you have time. They want to know more. Okay. I can continue, please. Okay, Mr. Shumon, he said, please tell something about upcoming US presidential elections. So people are interested to know more the presidential elections and about your stand. Yes.
Yes. So as I mentioned, I'm an independent presidential candidate. I have had endorsements from a few different organizations, but I am running as an independent, and also beginning to work with a new political party, and I'm very excited about that as well. But we are coming to the point in the 2020 presidential election where most of the candidates have now been selected. The other major third-party candidates from the Libertarian and Green parties have now been selected. The Democrat and Republican are essentially both secured. There might be some surprises there, but we don't know. So now this race is coming down to this end game of the remaining 4 months or so between now and November the 11th, and this is exciting, but also it's a little more disconcerting than maybe previous elections, because there's so many of these things going on. The black swan events that we mentioned, the global pandemic, the troubles that derive from these things. Both of these two most likely candidates to win the presidency, Donald Trump and Joseph Biden, they are in their 70s. they are at a high risk to develop coronavirus. It's a very real possibility that one of these men might not be in good condition by January of 2021, when they would be sworn in to the presidency, especially when conditions are worsening in the United States, rather than having flattened the curve, like so many of our friends that we mentioned have been more successful in doing. All of this creates a lot of anxiety and an awful lot of uncertainty in these times. And it's why I say to people that please go to benzion2020.com and reflect upon the policy initiatives that I described. Consider reading more about the real New Deal for America, because if we do have humane economic policies like a freedom dividend, a basic income, if we do have a public health service that is able to treat illness in the future, we won't have the civil unrest in the United States spreading out into the rest of the world. Because when you have the kind of economic security and political security that derives from it, you don't have these problems to the same degree. And the United States, earlier we mentioned imperialist qualities of the United States. We didn't mention one of the most significant of these, which is a kind of cultural imperialism. Everybody watches Hollywood movies. Everybody is fairly familiar with an awful lot of media from the United States. And this has impacts on the cultures of many, many other countries. And similarly, when the United States is at a point of unrest and uncertainty, as it is today, the rest of the world is negatively impacted. And so people in the United States, we have a duty to see that we start to fix these institutional problems, not only for the benefit of people living here, not only for the benefit of our failing middle class, but also for the benefit of global stability and friendship.
Thank you, Benzion. This is actually very good discussions and very good audience response. And hopefully, we will do more policy discussions, more debate, as well as we want to do research. And there is by this way we can contribute more in knowledge, and we can build up a knowledge-based society. That is our objective of World Talent Economy Forum. And today, how you come up with your dynamic leaderships, your dynamic analysis, hopefully with your own strategy and a lot of support, you will implement it in US economy. And we want to see you in the successful presidents and this position soon. So hopefully yes. So this is very nice discussions, and hopefully we can invite you more in our debate and policy discussion. Thank you.
I would be honored to do this again at the time of your choosing. And like I said, the WTEF is doing incredible work at this time. A lot of people right now, they're putting their heads down. They're not sure what to do. They're chasing their tails. So people like yourselves who are continuing to do good work despite the set of crises, I must applaud you. And the policy work, the interviews that I've seen, all of this is incredible. I would be overjoyed to do this again with you, and also to work with your partner organizations and with yourself, with the WTF, on the kinds of policy and research matters that you've discussed.
Thank you, sir. This is very nice discussions. You can see from the audience, they are very happy. All of them are very progressive. I think in the futures you can get a very big teams. Those who are working with your policy and policy related things. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for
please, I thank you all for your comments. This has been, and I would have loved to have spoken to you more. If you'd like to continue this conversation, you can email me at info@science-party.org. That's info@science-party.org. And we can continue this conversation of these policy matters or other things. And it was a pleasure to meet all of your listeners. And again, I would love to continue that conversation. I was introduced to your questions. I wasn't introduced to yourselves. So please feel free to make an introduction.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir,
Dr.
for
Wada.
your
It's been
time.
wonderful.
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
All right.